Enter this hallowed space, and let the sacred music awaken the spirit within. Stop deceiving yourself about what has been taking on right in front of your eyes. Chosen One, you have been surrounded by breadcrumbs of truth from the universe, and you are well aware of the time. We both know that the cosmic scales are going to tilt in ways that will leave them frantically trying to justify what they have sown, even if they continue to play their little games, put on their masks, and spin their stories. Even though you know it's karma, play pretend. Greetings from the world that benefits from your spiritual sleep, where you are a chosen one. They didn't tell you that karma doesn't only come for the guilty. It also comes to get what's rightfully yours. Chosen One, it's well past time for your collection day. That individual who has been orbiting your energies like a vulture over new prey is where the first thread begins. The person who constantly seems to know insider information about your company and somehow anticipates your next move before you've even fully developed it is the one I'm referring to. They have been observing you, analyzing your trends, and figuring out your weaknesses, not to help you, but to take advantage of them. Something else has been watching them while they've been watching you. There's a designated ledger in the cosmos. Additionally, every instance of deceit, manipulation, and attempt to darken your light has been documented, with interest compounded every day. Allow me to depict the final months or even years of your life for you, because there are several parallel timelines in this novel, and they are all going to collide in ways that will leave you gasping. Timeline 1. Harvesting energy. Someone, possibly several someones, has positioned themselves near enough to take advantage of your light, while also attempting to dull it. This is not an accident. You have been the unintentional source of energy for their energy economy, and this is deliberate spiritual warfare. Consider the person who always seems to need a little more from you. The family member who treats get-togethers like a show where they are the main act and you are the opening act. The friend who calls when they are drowning but vanishes when you are celebrating. Or the co-worker who somehow receives credit for ideas that came from your head. They assumed your supply was limitless, which was a crucial mistake. They thought you would never realize what was going on. They made a mistaken assumption. They don't realize that you were gathering information while they were busy pretending to have a superiority complex. Every conversation in which they made your problem seem trivial, while their small annoyances demanded instant attention and sympathy. Every instance in which they presented themselves as the authority on your own life, giving uninvited advice that somehow always benefited them more than you. For a long time, you assumed it was merely a coincidence, a case of unfortunate timing, or your imagination because the pattern was so delicate and well planned. Perhaps you were too needy, too sensitive, or too much. They were experts at getting you to doubt how you see the world, gaslighting under the cover of advice, manipulation under the pretext of mentoring. However, even while your conscious mind was offering justifications for their actions, your subconscious was keeping score. Because of this, even when nothing obviously bad happened, several exchanges left you feeling bewildered and exhausted. You would leave feeling somewhat diminished as a result. Your energy body was registering attacks that your mental body wasn't yet ready to identify, even when they had been encouraging. You see, they had a method, a methodical approach that they had most likely applied to others before you and were fully prepared to apply to others after you. Find someone who possesses natural abundance, genuine spiritual gifts, or genuine compassion. Present themselves as essential to that person's prosperity or contentment. Establish a dependency dynamic in which the selected individual feels compelled to contribute their time, resources, or opportunities. Deplete what they require gradually, while returning just enough to maintain the chosen one's investment. It is parasitism wrapped in a partnership, and vampires masquerading as pals. Timeline 2. The cycle of rejection. The deliberate rejection game is another pattern that has been present in your life at the same time. Someone has been manipulating your emotions by establishing a pattern of approval and rejection that keeps you always looking for their approval. For them, it was sport, and they would knock you down simply to see you get back up. They would disregard you, reject you, and make you feel inferior before watching you struggle to establish your value. They would then knock you down once again, right when you were about to win their approval. You always regained your strength when they knocked you down. You become more resilient with each rejection. In reality, every time they caused you to doubt your value, they were training you to see it on your own. Unbeknownst to them, they were training their own substitute. This cycle of rejection was a form of deliberate conditioning rather than arbitrary cruelty. They needed you to connect hardship with acceptance, camaraderie, and love. They wanted you to think that anything valuable required constant proof. They wanted you to believe that ease and tranquility were a sign that you weren't working hard enough. Your support of $70 revitalizes souls like the season that brings forth buds from dry branches. The most pernicious aspect is how they enabled you to participate in your own devaluation. They taught you to read their emotional weather patterns, predict their moods, and modify your behavior according to their implicit expectations. You turned into a spiritual contortionist, bending yourself into any shape that would win their acceptance, even if only momentarily. However, they failed to consider the cumulative impact of their manipulation. You learned an important lesson about the distinction between real connection and manufactured dependency from each cycle of optimism and disappointment. You discovered how to get approval from within each time they punished you by denying you their attention. Every time they made you feel inadequate, you found hidden sources of strength within yourself. At some point, every skilled manipulator overplays their hand. They mistakenly believe they can push indefinitely without facing any repercussions after getting intoxicated on their own. They stop concealing their genuine motivations because they are so sure of their power. And that's precisely what took place here. Third-party triangulation timeline 3. In the midst of all of this, third-party triangulation was another form of manipulation. In order to make you feel expendable and replaceable, someone has been manipulating events, fostering rivalry where none should exist, and introducing other individuals into your relationships. Like spiritual vampires at an all-you-can-eat buffet, they have been fueling the chaos and uncertainty by pitting several people against one another. However, the cosmos was forming its own triangle, the one it had selected. Authentic relationships were aligning in your path, while they were fabricating competition for their attention. People who would never consider forcing you to compete, for even the most basic respect, were already matching your frequency, because real people know what true is. Since the triangulation technique affects both your perspective of reality and your sense of self-worth, it may be the most advanced type of emotional manipulation. Third parties are basically gaslighting you about your own significance in their lives when they bring them into your relationship dynamic. This makes you wonder if your connection is unique or if you're just one of many interchangeable possibilities. If you are insecure about your beauty, they will pick someone who is conventionally pretty. If you are insecure about your intelligence, they will pick someone with great credentials. If you are insecure about your success, they will pick someone who is prospering. Under the cover of social networking, it is psychological warfare. Instead of being plentiful energies that naturally flow between aligned spirits, they want you to think that love, friendship, and recognition are scarce commodities that must be fought for. They want you to believe that gaining their approval is so important that it's worth battling for. Additionally, triangulation keeps you from developing genuine connections with those involved. You are positioned as their rival rather than as someone who might value you. You're trained to see danger everywhere and are ensnared in a web of fabricated rivalry rather than creating a network of support. The world, meantime, was matching you with souls who recognize that genuine connection doesn't necessitate rivalry. These individuals see your worth right away, and without pretense, without tests, without hoops. Even a $5 donation is the first spark of a miracle when it joins with the hand of the Lord, who multiplies one loaf to thousands. The point at which timelines meet. This is the point at which the increasing action achieves its crescendo, and these timelines begin to converge. It might have been a steady burn that finally broke, or it might have changed overnight. You began to pose new queries. Rather than, why don't they respect me? You began by questioning, why am I vying for the attention of someone who is obviously blind to the fact that gold is there in front of them? They're going to lose everything they've built on your lowered sense of value, not just their source of power. They were basing their entire sense of self-worth on your readiness to settle for less than you deserve, while you were preoccupied with wondering if you were being overly sensitive, asking for too much, or if you should just be thankful for whatever scraps they tossed your way. Their confidence was parasitic, preying on your insecurities, rather than genuine. They made you believe that their league was superior to yours, but in reality, there was never a league, just you acting from real substance, while everyone else played pretend with smoke and mirrors. In actuality, they were reaching down to drain you, but they wanted you to think you were reaching up to touch them. Do you recall how they dictated the tempo of your partnership? How did they decide whether you were worthy of their time and attention? How did they set the tempo? And how did they decide the depth? They established a routine in which you were always pursuing, proving, and making money. What they didn't expect, though, is that you would ultimately become weary of getting back up for their amusement. You would eventually discover that the game was rigged and that the only way to win was to abstain from playing. So you gave up pursuing. You ceased your self-explanation. People should have been battling to keep you at their table, but you stopped fighting for scraps. Their true panic struck at that point, because their whole identity began to fall apart without you acting as the enthusiastic supplicant. With disastrous results, Timeline 1 collided with Timeline 2. The one who had been gathering your energy abruptly became aware that their supply line was interrupted. Suddenly, the individual who had been playing rejection games was rejected, passively, which is worse than actively. They couldn't compete with your own self-respect, which had taken their position. They don't just quietly come to terms with this new reality. The selected one, oh no. A spiritual predator escalates when they recognize that their feeding source is no longer available. They adjust. Their methods of manipulation get increasingly inventive. They now have to persuade not just you, but also everyone else that they are the victim in this situation, which is when pretending reaches its most advanced level. Your contribution of $35 starts a movement that is not only material but also spiritual. When you sow, God begins to water. They become skilled storytellers who craft tales about how you evolved, how you got challenging, and how you left them without warning. They portray themselves as the bewildered, wounded party who merely wishes to know what went wrong. However, if you pick one, this is where your superpower derives from the accumulated data. You've already seen this film. Their patterns are familiar to you. You are aware of manipulation techniques disguised as attractive bundles of worry and perplexity. Guilt-tripping masquerading as real concern is easy to identify. Love-bombing disguised as newly discovered adoration is easily recognized. Through shared friends, they will attempt to re-enter your life, obtaining information about your current circumstances and searching for vulnerabilities to take advantage of. They will suddenly get interested in your passions in an attempt to arrange for chance meetings. They will create emergencies that call for your specialized expertise or abilities, hoping that your empathy will overcome your boundaries. Some may even fabricate situations to make you wonder if leaving was the correct decision. The frequency at which such strategies were used is no longer applicable to you. You'll know its imitation when they begin to use aspects of your growth path, such as discussing spirituality, healing, or personal growth. They are able to replicate the actions, but not the intent. They are unable to create the transition, but they can act as though they comprehend the path. Anyone in a position of genuine authority can see that pretend is not real. Timeline 3 is still unfolding in the meantime. Something lovely has been taking place in your world, while they have been frantically trying to reconstruct their house of cards. Just as planned, those genuine ties began to emerge. Your intuition became really keen. You developed an almost magical capacity to see through manipulation. Since spiritual vampires were no longer stealing your energy, you started drawing real connections and opportunities. Not because you changed your surroundings or appearance, but because you changed your frequency. people began to see you differently. The cosmic justice perfect storm. Here, the three timelines come together to form a cosmic justice storm. The individual who has been observing you suddenly becomes aware that they are being observed. The individual who has been ignoring you is suddenly frantically trying to get your attention. As you develop sincere relationships with others who value you, the person who planned the triangulation finds themselves alone. They all play the same role in your spiritual education, or at the very least, they follow the same playbook. Even though they had no intention of teaching you anything other than acquiescence, they were teachers, chosen ones. When someone treated you as though you were unworthy, they were actually announcing their own shortcomings. Each rejection demonstrated their incapacity to see worth. They didn't deserve access to it, as evidenced by every minute they made you doubt your value. The cosmic joke is that you were developing into a league of your own, while they were busy trying to convince you that you weren't in their league. In this league, progress is prioritized above comfort. Mutual respect is the bare minimum rather than the ultimate aim, and authenticity is more important than approval. However, if you are the chosen one, the stakes will rise as a result of spiritual predators adapting and the game changing in ways you must be ready for. They will return with fresh tactics. Some may present prospects for business that seem too good to be true, and they are. People will fabricate heartwarming tales to appeal to your empathy and overrule your judgment. Some may attempt to exploit new acquaintances as leverage, causing triangulation where none previously existed. With your $25, you live out Jesus' words, "Where two or three are gathered together, there am I." The blessing of unity. With great vengeance, that original timeline reappears. After taking notes, the individual who has been observing you will now apply all they have discovered about your weaknesses. They will present pricey presents with unnoticeable conditions. In order to entice you back into their web, they will fabricate complex scenarios. Since direct manipulation is no longer effective, they will attempt indirect strategies, such as contacting your family, interfering with your professional network, or contaminating your new relationships before you can benefit from them. The universe is planning their exposure on several levels, while they plot to take back control of your energy. The identical trends are being seen by the person they triangulated you with. The co-worker they deceived to claim credit for your work is challenging the story. The family member who betrayed you is observing discrepancies. No matter how deeply hidden, truth comes to the surface. The other performers see the script for what it is when you are not performing your part. When the manipulator's web breaks, their phony performance is clearly seen. They will distribute false information about your mental health, ruin your chances, and stage crises that require your attention in an ever more desperate attempt to reclaim your importance. Their desperate actions demonstrate the authority you have regained. Their fear is evidence of your development, and their plots validate that you were worth fighting for. They have nothing genuine to offer, so they fight nasty. Recall all of the times you were knocked down and then got back up. There was a purpose to that instruction. You learned to recognize patterns. You became adept at spotting manipulation. Their acceptance no longer had the same effect on you, and your tolerance for rejection increased. The high point. Everything finally erupts into the open at the chosen one. Your new frequency is now used by the people entering your life. They can perceive your worth without you having to show it. They are equally invested, so you don't need to try to get their attention. They provide the entire meal, so you don't have to compete for scraps. This change generates conversation. Those who assumed you were always available will be critical of your new expectations. They will label you fussy, tough, or altered. They will attempt to blame you for rejecting their ideal of friendship, love, or collaboration. They will portray themselves as the victims of your development. Without them, you're thriving rather than just getting by. Despite their objections, the achievement they claimed was unattainable without their consent is actually occurring. You're finding the connections they said you wouldn't find. The abundance that they said was out of your grasp is coming in organically. You are no longer attempting to prove anything. Your achievement isn't retaliation, rather, it's the outcome of acting with genuine power, rather than desperation and lack. Do you recall the feeling of knowing I described at the beginning? That feeling that something wasn't quite right, that you were being played, that there was a game going on there that you weren't entirely aware of. That sensation was your intuition, your early warning system, telling you that individuals were using your energy without intending to return the favor. However, you can now use that same user-friendly system as a navigation tool to find opportunities and connections that match your enhanced frequency. The discernment that made you practically impervious to manipulation has replaced the sensitivity that left you open to manipulation. They will mimic your new language and energy, talking about limits, healing, and genuine connections. When they see that their old strategies aren't working, they will accuse you of being unkind and of leaving them when they were in need, using the ideas you have adopted as weapons to guilt you back into their web. However, you now understand the distinction between performance art and true transformation. Real growth, as you know, occurs gradually via constant activity rather than abrupt, dramatic statements. Genuine accountability can be distinguished from deceptive excuses. They are unable to make sincere connections elsewhere because of their desperate attempt to keep control. Life goes on without them while they obsess. For everyone else, they stay the same even when they act as though they are changing. Their retaliation is not your main concern. You're too busy taking pleasure in what you've earned. You're celebrating your accomplishments, not keeping tabs on their mistakes. You care about your own development, not about their hardships. The end result of their behavior is this apathy, your total emotional detachment from their drama. If you plant a $60 seed of love, every branch that rises from that seed carries hope to someone else. They never learn to exist without being needed because they tried so hard to make you need them. They so successfully persuaded you that you were insufficient that they were never able to learn how to be sufficient themselves. They lost touch with reality itself because they expended so much energy trying to manipulate how you saw it. They are still acting, but only for the audience that is left. You live behind the curtain, so you can see through the performance. You are aware of their desperation in private and their public demeanor. Previously dispersed across a dozen unworthy individuals, the energy is now focused and concentrated. The affection that was freely offered to wasteful people is now invested in those who value it. Creating value that speaks for itself has replaced the time spent persuading others of your value. They couldn't deal with the fact that you remembered, not that you changed. You recalled that someone's incapacity to see your worth does not diminish it. You recalled that who certifies your value does not define it. You recalled that even though you voluntarily placed your power in their hands, it was never there. Every barrier you uphold allows others to establish their own. Every criterion you refuse to compromise demonstrates to others what is feasible. You are a part of a collective awareness change that extends much beyond your personal experience every time you choose peace over chaos. In addition to underestimating you, those who attempted to keep you tiny also underestimated the consequences of someone asserting their full potential. They believed they were dealing with just another individual to control and influence. They were unaware that they were tampering with the fate of a chosen person. You were picked because of your difficulties, not in spite of them. Everyone who undervalued you set you up for something they couldn't have predicted. You gained the power you needed to disrupt generational patterns from every experience that attempted to shatter you. Every instance of feeling inadequate taught you that, when the time came, you were more than enough. They are currently going through karma, which is the inevitable result of breaking spiritual law rather than punishment. Energy is constantly looking for equilibrium. We'll repay what was taken. We'll give what was denied. We'll deliver what was postponed. Therefore, keep this in mind when they return, which they will, with stories of reform and promises of improvement. Recall the clarity that is currently coursing through you. Keep in mind the tranquility that results from at last comprehending the game that was played at your expense. Keep in mind that your healing process is now a generational one rather than merely a personal one. and you're just getting started. Selected 1. This marks the end of their influence over your tale, not the end of yours. Unshakable knowledge has taken the place of the nagging sensation that began this trip. People want to hear what you have to say. So conversations that used to end when you walked into the room now begin. You are suddenly attracted to the opportunities that eluded you like magnets. You can act like you want to, but you know deep down that it's karma. And karma, when it's chosen, always knows exactly what it's due.